Staying calm in the workplace and how to be a magnetic project manager. Welcome, welcome, my friends, wherever you might be in the world. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Many of us are professional business people. We're either project managers or team members, or we're directors or VPs or C level executives. But we all share a common challenge. And that common challenge is staying calm under pressure. My question to you is, do you struggle with this? Have you ever struggled with it? Has someone on your team ever struggled with it? Well, I learned very quickly that in a fast paced environment, it could be very hard to stay calm under pressure every single time without some intentionality. I'd like to invite to the stage my PMP colleagues and brothers who are going to be joining me on this journey. I'd like to say welcome to those who are joining on LinkedIn and those joining on YouTube. So let's first of all have an intro. My name is Phil. I am a project management coach. I'm also an agile aficionado, if you wanted to call me that. And I just love helping people be the best version of themselves. The organization behind this is the Project Leadership Institute, but we have some of our members here as well. I'd like to ask Ed for an introduction.
Hello, my
Hello,
name
my
is
name is
Edward Cope,
Edward Cope,
go by the
go
name
by
of
the name of
ED. We don't
ED.
try to
We don't
make it
try to
more
make
than
it
what it
more than
is.
what
It
it
just
is. It
simply
just
means
simply
Ed.
means Ed.
Definitely here
Definitely here
to,
to
I love
I
project
love project
management. I
management. I
love
love
inspiration
inspiration
and just
and just
growing as a
growing as a
project
project
manager, as
manager,
well
as
as
well as
improving my life
improving my life
1% at a
1% at a
time
time,
and helping
and helping
others
others
do the
do the
same
same
through applied knowledge. Passing it back over to you, Phil.
Thank you very much for that, Ed. Why don't we have an intro from our friend Chris? Chris has been a project manager and in the IT space for a very long time. I'd like Chris to give us an introduction. Chris? I think Chris is on mute. Let me ask if Chris can unmute. Can you unmute yourself, Chris? Do you copy? All right, let's go to Daryl while Chris is sorting out the microphone. Daryl, do you want to give an introduction?
Hello,
Hello,
folks.
folks.
First of
First
all,
of all,
thank you, Phil,
thank
for
you, Phil,
having
for
me
having me
and
and
me as well.
me as well.
I'm a
I'm a
project
project
manager,
manager,
heavily
heavily
focused in
focused
project
in project
scheduling,
scheduling,
and I'm
and
here
I'm
just
here
like the
just
rest
like
of
the
you
rest of
all,
you all,
just trying to
just trying
learn
to learn
and be a
and
better
be a
version
better
of
version
myself.
of myself.
Awesome, great deal. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. Chris, if you're able to speak at any time, don't hesitate to unmute. But let's talk about staying calm in the workplace. Before we go fully into staying calm in the workplace, I want to wager that individuals that are magnetic in the definition of magnetism, they attract, right? I want to make it very clear that loose cannons do not attract. A loose cannon is not going to attract anyone. And this is a thesis behind a book that my buddy Ed has written. And the book is titled The Magnetic Project Manager. So I'd like to bring that book to center stage, and I want to ask Ed to give us a very succinct view as to what a magnetic project manager is. If we say magnetic project manager, what is a magnetic project manager? Ed, do you want to tell us?
Yes, thank
Yes,
you,
thank you,
Phil. I
Phil. I
appreciate that.
appreciate
A
that. A
magnetic project
magnetic project
manager
manager
develops
develops
a
a
charisma
charisma
around
around
that
that
person,
person,
meaning that
meaning that
they want
they
to
want to
attract
attract
the
the
1%, the
1%, the
2%,
2%,
meaning that
meaning that
we
we
involve a
involve a
situation in
situation
which
in which
one of the
one of the
chapters, which
chapters,
is
which is
chapter
chapter
4,
4,
in which
in
we
which
talk
we talk
about
about
Brad
Brad
Turbo's
Turbo's
quote, in
quote,
which, and
in
I'll
which,
read
and
it
I'll read it
verbatim,
verbatim,
is some
is
people
some
don't
people
want to be
don't want to be
fixed
fixed
because being
because being
broken gets
broken
them
gets them
attention. Ooh,
attention. Ooh,
that's heavy.
that's heavy.
And the reason
And the
why I
reason
love
why I
that
love that
particular
particular
quote is
quote is
because of the
because of
fact
the
that
fact that
staying
staying
calm
calm
is
is
the
the
roadway, but
roadway, but
along the way,
along the
you
way,
may have
you
to
may have to
exit off
exit
and do
off and do
certain things
certain
to
things
get
to get
your
your
team
team
excited, to get
excited, to
them
get them
pumped up.
pumped up.
Sort of
Sort of
example like
example like
Steve Kerr
Steve Kerr
and Greg
and Greg
Popovich, they
Popovich, they
mastered this
mastered
really
this
well.
really well.
They will get
They will get
angry, but they
angry,
weren't
but they weren't
angry.
angry. They were
They were
showing,
showing courage to their
courage to their
team to show
team
the
to show the
support
support
that they
that
have,
they
and they were
have, and they
creating
were
a
creating a
magnetic
magnetic
atmosphere
atmosphere
around them
around them
to
to
draw
draw
people in to
people
say,
in to
wow,
say,
if my
wow,
coach
if my
can get
coach can get
fired up like
fired up
that,
like
why
that,
am I
why
not
am I not
displaying the
displaying
same
the
thing?
same thing?
And so
And
that's
so
one of the
that's one of
things
the
that
things that
I
I
ensure and I
ensure and
work
I
on
work
day
on
in and
day
day
in
out.
and day
Some
out.
days I
Some
get it
days I get
right,
it
some
right,
days I
some
get it
days I get
wrong.
it
But
wrong.
most
But
of the
most of the
time,
time,
when I'm
when I'm
aiming
aiming
right
right
and making
and
sure
making
that the
sure that the
audience and,
audience
and
and,
my
my
stakeholders
stakeholders
understand the
understand the
importance
importance
of being
of being
calm. And
calm.
you're going to
And
get
you're gonna get
frustrated because this
frustrated
is
because
life.
this
No
is
one
life.
is
No one is
perfect. But,
perfect.
and that's the
And that's the
conjunction. I don't know
conjunction. I don't
about
know
you, but when
about
I
you,
was
but when I
growing
was
up,
growing up,
there was
there
this
was this
cartoon where it
cartoon
said,
where it said,
conjunction,
conjunction,
junction, what's
junction,
your
what's your
function?
function?
Meaning
Meaning
basically
basically
anything before
anything
the
before
but
the
is
but is
irrelevant. Now,
irrelevant. Now,
after that,
after that,
how do we
how
move
do we move
forward? How do
forward?
we
How
make
do we make
ensure that the
ensure that the
team
team
knows that we
knows
got
that we
their
got
back,
their
that we're
back,
going to
that we're
step
going to
in front
step
of
in front
those
of those
the
the
array of
array
things that
of
are going to
things that are
come
going
your
to
way.
come your
So
way.
that's from a
So that's
high
from a
level,
high
Phil.
level,
There's
Phil.
9
There's
chapters
9
in
chapters
here.
in here.
There's some
There's some
great
great
information that I
information that
really
I
truly
really truly
believe
believe
could have an
could have an
impact
impact
in your
in
life,
your life,
as well as
as
I'm
well as
reading
I'm
it
reading
day in
it
and day
day
out,
in and day out,
wanting to get
wanting to
better
get better
myself. So,
myself. So
Awesome stuff, Ed. I'm really excited about this book, and I'm going to ask you to do us a favor, Ed. If you could drop a link to this awesome book in the chat, that will be much appreciated. A lot of folks might be struggling with the contents that you describe in this book because the PMI, they made it very clear that the top 2% of project managers, as voted by their colleagues and peers, are those who have great interpersonal skills, great leadership skills. That's really what you focus on to be a magnetic project manager. So I want to encourage everyone to look into grabbing a copy of this book, and not just getting a copy of the book, but uh, actually listening, reading it and listening to it. So can you hear, is my voice coming across
yeah, you're coming
okay?
across
coming
really
across
well,
really
Phil.
well, Phil.
Good, good. Okay.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure that there's no reverb.
But you know
But
what,
you know
Phil, as
what,
you were
Phil, as you
saying
were
that,
saying that,
I was just
I
sitting
was
here
just sitting here
thinking
thinking
about
about
the
the
importance while
importance
you're
while
trying to
you're trying to
maintain
maintain
a
a
positive
positive
attitude. Like
attitude. Like
people think
people
because
think
you have a
because you have a
positive
positive
attitude that
attitude
you
that
can't
you
get
can't get
frustrated or you
frustrated
can't
or you
get
can't
down on
get down on
yourself.
yourself.
Uh, I remember they
I
asked
remember
Zig
they asked Zig
Ziglar when
Ziglar when
a lady ran
a lady
into
ran
him and
into
said,
him and
you
said,
know, how come
you
you're
know, how
not
come you're
jumping
not
around and
jumping
all
around and all
excited like you
excited
normally
like you
are when you're
normally
on
are when you're
stage?
on
He
stage?
said,
He said,
well,
well,
because of the
because
fact
of the
that I'm
fact
not
that I'm not
jumping around and
jumping
not
around and
excited
not
doesn't
excited
mean
doesn't
I
mean
don't have
I
the
don't
same
have the
energy
same
inside
energy
me. And so
inside me. And so
a lot of
a lot
times
of
we can
times
get
we can get
confused with
confused with
optimism
optimism
or a
or
growth
a growth
mindset, which is
mindset,
also
which
in the
is
book. We
also in the
talk
book. We
about
talk
growth
about growth
mindset
mindset
because
because
versus a fixed
versus a fixed
mindset.
mindset.
But there
But
are going to
there
be
are going to be
challenges in
challenges
which
in
you
which
are
you
going
are
to
going to
face.
face.
And it's
And
about
it's
leaning
about
on
leaning
what
on
the
with the
information that
information
you've
that you've
learned
learned
and being
and
able to
being able to
apply it,
apply it.
because there's a
Because there's a
difference
difference
between
between
gathering
gathering
information
information
and
and
applying
applying
information.
information.
Because
Because
when you're
when you're
gathering
gathering
information, but you're not
but you're not
experimenting,
experimenting,
that's why I
that's
love
why I
that
love
Scrum
that Scrum
framework,
framework
because of
because of
having the
having the
ability to
ability
run
to run
sprints to
sprints
see
to see
if this
if this
worked. Now, no
worked. Now, no
disrespect, because
disrespect,
I've been
because I've
in
been
the
in the
predictive model
predictive
for
model
so
for
long
so
as far
long
as
as far as
waterfall,
waterfall,
but I
but I
understand the
understand the
importance of a
importance of
Scrum
a Scrum
framework. I
framework. I
believe in it
believe in it
truly
truly
because you get a quicker output of what's going to work well for what you're doing. And that's just a model of life. You should be able to, this is why I love this thing that you call, that I call project management, because it's a transferable skill set in your personal life as well, because you are going to have trials, you are going to be have tribulations, and you're not immune to that. But even though you're not immune, that doesn't mean that you can't move forward. That doesn't mean that you can't take a step back in order to take a couple steps forward. So and the reason why I put this book together is because I want to be vulnerable. No, I'm not perfect. Yeah, I'm going to have moments, but those moments are teachable moments. Those moments allow me to be able to come on here and say, hey guys, I'm vulnerable just like you. It's the only difference is that I took the information I learned and I applied it instead of just reading book after book. So if you pick up this book, which I hope you are, hope you will. If you want to pick up 10 copies, 20 copies, I support that. But the point I'm trying to make is that it's about applying the information that's in the book and not just reading it just to say you read another book, because that's not going to do anything for you. I want to be, I want to serve in a capacity that is bigger than myself. I want to dream bigger than myself. So back over to you, Phil. You know I can go all day with this.
No, thank you very much, Ed. I want to make sure that I'm not echoing. Am I echoing to anyone?
No.
Do you hear an echo? Because we had a LinkedIn user say there was an echo. It's making it difficult. So I hope everyone can hear me all right. I can hear you all right, Ed, and I can hear Daryl okay. All right. So now that we've kind of set up your thesis for the book, let's go into the unique topic of being calm at work, cultivating employee well-being and managing stress. So I'll just speak from experience. I'll just say, for me, to stay calm under pressure, there are certain things I do. Number one, I need to be aware of my feelings first and foremost. I need to have an awareness of my current state. I need to assess my current state, and I'm not waiting until things get out of control. I need to have read my own manual enough to know when I'm getting to the point that I can't take any more of whatever I'm experiencing or whatever I'm getting. So as a project manager, in gradations of statuses, you know when you're 10% on your worst point, 20, 30. Beyond 30, if you're still in the room with whoever you're going through stress with, then you didn't get the memo. In my mind, the moment you get to 20, that's already red. 30 is the no-go. 30, take yourself out of the situation. How do I take myself out of the situation? Well, what I do is I go to a different physical location. It could mean walking out of the building, sitting under a tree, or going for a walk. It could be doing something as mundane as going to the men's room and dousing some water over my head, over my face, to just change the state of how I'm feeling. When that is done, I need to make a conscious assessment of how I'm going to bring myself back down to the safe zone, which is a 0 or 10. If I'm not in the safe zone, I have no business being around people. Now, you don't want to do the opposite, which is let it get to a 50, 60, 70. I had a boss, name withheld, who got to a point where this individual was so mad that this individual picked a glass container and flung it at the wall, yelling profanities in the middle of the afternoon, and everyone in the office could hear. That individual had got into, in my mind, definitely way beyond the red zone, had gone into a 60, 70. You don't want to wait for that to happen. So there are ways that you can handle stress, and I've just given you one very pragmatic way, which is knowing your feelings and emotions. This is number one in EI. Emotional intelligence is really what this is about. And EI just says understanding your emotions, being able to bridle your emotions, and understanding how to influence the emotions of others. That's what EI is. So, your step number one is to understand your emotions, know how to bridle your emotions before talking about the other person, right? So, this is number one in the EI rule book of emotional intelligence. So, I want to give you some actionable steps just very quickly before I invite Ed and Daryl to contribute to the discussion. But number one, you got to comprehend stress. Stress is not always the enemy. Stress could actually be a warning sign. So if you're feeling a little bit rattled in the workplace, think about that as a trigger that something is not right. You need to take yourself out of the equation, right? So it's not always the enemy. It's about understanding stress and using it to our advantage, right? So when you explore stress and its impact, stress could have a huge impact on your work. You may think, oh, I'm present, but you're really not. You're not getting as much done. And even if you're getting as much done, the quality of what you're getting done could very well be diminishing very quickly. Number two, like I said, you got to recognize the signs of stress. On a gauge of 0 to 100, when are you at a 30? If you're still in the room, you're making a mistake. If you're still in the company of people, you're making a mistake. Get it right. In my mind, 30 is like the worst threshold. 20, if you're smart, start doing something to correct it. Don't let it fester and get worse. Okay? So 1.3, the self-assessment, stress self-assessment, that's what I'm talking about. Is my rate of speech going up? Is my temperature going up? Am I becoming louder? Am I getting more active? These are all checkboxes you need to assess. And if those are showing it's getting to the point of no return, then you need to do something. So I want to invite Daryl to talk about comprehending stress. Daryl, I've given some pragmatic illustrations of how I do it. Do you want to speak to how you would advise based on your experience, based on how you handle it?
Phil, before we move on, there is still an echo whenever Ed and I are speaking.
Do you hear an echo, Ed? So I guess I should mute
I
my
do.
microphone. So let me go ahead and mute, and you try.
All right, mic check.
Yeah, you sound good.
All right, awesome.
How do I
Phil,
sound?
thank you. Not echoey.
Okay.
All right, so Phil, thank you again for having me in this session, and thank you for removing the echo whenever Ed and I speak. Um, so with this book, Phil, I wanted to just turn the questions around to you in regards to your book. What inspired you to write this book and focus on the topic of the magnetic aspects of project management?
Good question, Daryl. The reason why I wrote the book was what I noticed through my career of more than a decade was that it wasn't always the most technical savvy project manager that was getting the job done. It was the one that was good with working with people. The ones that didn't have that charisma of working with people, they always ran into roadblocks. And we all run into roadblocks with projects. But what I mean by is that they didn't develop that circle of trust in a sense, meaning that people wouldn't come to them and tell them what was actually going on. You know, there's a difference between surface work and root work. The root work is really what's more important than the actual surface work.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing, Ed.
Mhm.
Phil, as far as staying calm, with your experience and also with Ed's experience, how would you feel using tactical empathy in this conversation of relating to your book, Ed?
Say that question again. I thought that was say that one more time there. I'm sorry.
This is a question for you and Phil. How would you use tactical empathy in situations where you're handling a tough stakeholder or applying your book in regards to project management and even in real life?
Okay. You want to start that one, Phil, and I'll close it.
Okay, I was saying you go. So bear in mind, my mic is a trigger here for reverb. So please don't speak when my mic is on because it won't sound good. I'll have to go. I have to mute myself before you speak. So thank you for the question, Daryl. And I was going to share along these lines later on, but for those on the call, what Daryl is referring to is the ability to see things from a different person's perspective, the ability to take yourself out of a situation, even though you might be in it, but to be able to see it from the other person's perspective. Case in point, Stephen R. Covey, he was talking about the situation he experienced on the train. He was in a train and there were these kids throwing things, making noise. Their dad just sat down there like he couldn't control them, and they seemed rather loud and boisterous. And everyone on the train was looking around at them and saying, "What's wrong with these kids? What's wrong with this man? Can't he get his kids under control?" And someone approached him to ask, "What's going on? Get your kids under control." And he said, "I'm really sorry. Their mom has been in the hospital. We're just coming from the hospital. We just lost her just a few moments ago." Wow. From being accusatory about this man's stance and just sitting there and letting his children run amok, to realizing the huge moment of loss that they had just gone through. It just takes it from seeing it one way to seeing things in a totally different perspective. So that's a pretty heavy example. But in the same token, for me, I have a number of philosophies that I use to govern how I interact with my stakeholders. And it just has helped me stay calm under pressure. I also want to attribute this to a book written by one of my friends, Dr. Rick Brinkman. He wrote the book, Dealing with People You Can't Stand. And the number one way that I have taken from that book of dealing with people is, first of all, understand that you have options. You have options. The question is, are you going to make the right choice? Now, when it comes to empathy, making a choice around what Daryl said is tactical empathy, this is where you need to see things from the other person's perspective, like in Stephen Covey's example, understand their feelings while maintaining your own goals. We're not saying you're conceding your goals and objectives. No, you still have your goals and objectives in the discussion, but you're able to see things from someone else's perspective, and you very well may just find yourself moving over to their own side of how they see things. You got to hear them out. So this is not discredit what you're thinking or your emotions or what no, we're not saying that. But we're saying put yourself in the other person's shoes. So there's three perspectives in every situation. My perspective, your perspective, the outside of the box, seeing both of us perspective. There's three. You need to be able to see those other two. The perspective of the onlooker, which is why mediation works in a lot of cases. But there has to be that mediation perspective, and there has to be the other person, most importantly, that person's perspective. I'll give you one example and then I'll move on because I think you're getting the idea. I had a stakeholder who was, in my mind, very difficult. I was the archiving manager in a bank, Citibank, and I had a very challenging stakeholder. Nothing was ever right in this stakeholder's eyes. Until one day I began to ask the question, this stakeholder has asked for certain confidential documents. I mean, these are like high-powered deal level documents. And they're always late because your team fell, whatever the reason. Oh, we're coming from outside of London and the streets are crowded and sorry we're late. There's an SLA. Hello. So if a customer is insisting on a certain level of quality and you begin to see the customer as, yeah, they've just been difficult, then you didn't get the memo because you're not seeing things from their perspective. There's a certain level of quality, an SLA, a service level agreement that you're meant to adhere to. So one day the light bulb just came on. You're wrong. You're always delivering these things late. Your team is always delivering these things late. The courier is always late. So begin seeing it from the customer's perspective, because if the customer doesn't sign off on those documents, we don't get paid, even if the driver has driven 70 miles. If that document gets to the bank, to the trade floor, wherever it's going late, you don't get paid for that delivery. So it got to the point I was like, okay, we're not going to get paid because we didn't meet the SLA. So I go over to this stakeholder, I'm like, I'm really sorry. We did not get this to you on time. I understand that you are not going to pay for this delivery, and that's okay. I understand. I'm sorry. And then something very strange happened. At that point, this is someone who's always like, you're late, you're not going to get paid. You're late, you're not going to get paid. But the moment I took myself out of that, yeah, he's just been difficult, to congruence, tactical empathy, being on the same page with a customer and saying, yeah, I understand. This is bad. It's unacceptable. I'm sorry. That day, he said, no, I'm actually going to sign for it on this occasion. And he signed for, are you kidding me? He signed for a late document delivery. This is someone who had always said, no, 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 no. But the moment I was able to see things from his perspective, his whole attitude became one of empathy himself. And it became a running joke because anytime those documents had to be delivered, I'm talking about deals, like millions and millions of deals, right? Dollars of deals. Whenever that document came a little bit late, the running joke is, it's late, but I'm going to sign for it. He now came from a place of empathy, knowing we tried our best. It might have been 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes late. But the story, the thesis of the story is, when you show empathy, no matter how long it takes, empathy will be shown back to you. So tactical empathy can be used in a variety of ways. Number one, mirroring, right? Mirroring is repeating back to the person what they have said, verbally and non-verbally. If they're nodding, you nod. If they're shaking, it shows that you're listening to them. And it's called mirroring, and science has proven this works. The other one is labeling, identifying and acknowledging the person's feelings. I understand how you're feeling, right? It helps them to feel heard and understood in my example of this individual. The other one is calibrating. A good project manager is one who can read the other's communication style, and you are calibrating your communication style to match the other person's. If the other person is really upset, you show that empathy by calibrating through your body language, through your tone of voice, through your expression. You know, the great Professor Emeritus Albert Mehrabian, he did a series of experiments, and he found out that when you're communicating with anyone, they are checking the boxes of congruence. Your words, your tone of voice, your body language, are they all adding up? If the body language is not adding up, you're not going to come across as being very empathetic. But when your body language and your facial expressions match what you are saying, you're now on board. So as a project manager, you got to calibrate. You got to always say, does my body language exude concern? I'm, I'm really sorry. I'm sorry. No, you're not. You're not sorry. Your body language does not show sorry. Or, yeah, I'm really excited about that. That doesn't show excitement. People are going to not judge what you're saying. They're going to judge how they're seeing you interact with them. They're also going to judge you based on your tone of voice. So, tactical empathy, Daryl, you open Pandora's box because this is something that we could go on and on about for hours. And the last one I'll talk about is reframing. And I've kind of given you the Stephen Covey example. But reframing is presenting the situation in a new way that is more appealing to the other person. So even though that guy on the train didn't know that he was reframing, you can reframe intentionally instead of coming across with the pros and the cons. Come across with a question: how do you see this situation, as opposed to these are the pros, these are the cons. No, let them work it out. And it could be more appealing to a very analytical person when you ask them how they view the world versus telling them how you see it, right? And it can help to overcome objections, and it can help to move whatever negotiation or discussion forward, right? So the key thing is you got to be genuine based on the great Professor Emeritus Albert Mehrabian's 55-38-7. 55% of the weight of that communication, right? You could say body language trumps everything, tone of voice 38. And it's not a one size fits all. There's a lot more to the study. But I want you to just take it as a rule of thumb. When you're communicating, just be genuinely interested and your body language will follow suit. Try to see things from their perspective, be honest and transparent, and be respectful. All if you follow these with a mindset of being empathetic, but tactically, as Daryl put it, is tactical empathy. It has to be part of the playbook for you to always use tactical empathy. If you do use it, you will find it harder to be mad and to do crazy stuff. Full disclosure, anyone ever done anything crazy that you're like, my goodness, what was I thinking? You ever been there? I've been there. I'm going to put myself on blast. But you don't want to do what I did, because that's not the way to do it. You ever been so mad in a job, in a work situation, that you just said, that's it, without a word to anyone? Think about the dumb aspects of this action. Going to the reception and handing in your badge without a word to anyone, and walking out of that establishment. I'm talking about a multi-billion establishment. I'll keep the name private. But you don't want it to get to that point. If I had used tactical empathy, I would not have done that. You don't want it to get to that. All right. Daryl, see what you didn't. See what you did with your question. That question was a loaded one.
Well, Phil, Ed's book, the Magnetic Project Management or Project Manager, it hits home for me because in today's current events, COVID really took a lot out of us because now not only how virtually you can see and you can actually interact with the person through video and see their exact emotions, um, actions, and their tone of voice. We couldn't do that before. Now COVID had us exercise that opportunity to read people through a video camera. And Ed's book talks about emotional intelligence, building trust, coaching, mentoring, um, conflict resolutions, all part of the Pinball Guide and also part of real life situations that we had to exercise during COVID and post COVID as well. So thank you for sharing and going down that rabbit hole with us.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, Phil. And you set the bar really high, so at least let me see if I can jump up and grab it. Um, what I've learned through this journey, it has really continually helped me grow about being tactical. One of the things I really understood, I started first of all looking at just material out there. One of my favorite books that I've read was by Jocko, called Extreme Ownership. And I'm guilty just like anyone else here, getting frustrated, and because I know, not think that a particular stakeholder should be more committed and not interested. Let's park right there, because there's a difference when you're dealing with individuals that are just interested. That may not be worth your time. But when they're committed, it's a whole different type of, environment. Now you're willing to spend time, and you're willing to invest to understand that root. Remember, I talked about that earlier. I know we were echoing, but the root, not the surface of what is actually going on. I love the story that Phil shared about Stephen Covey. And I also thought about that too when I was dealing with a difficult stakeholder. And I won't say the person's name, but I'll be transparent and say it was a manager. And what I couldn't understand was, why were they micromanaging me as a project manager instead of allowing me to lead, not manage the actual project? And so one day I walked into the office, and this is one of the things I love about the Scrum framework, of being able to have a safe environment to talk. That's another thing we have to look at, is we have to create more safe environments to have transparent conversation, instead of, as my grandma would say, boy, don't beat around the bush. Let's get straight to it. And that's what I would love more of in organizations. But going back to this story, is that I was asking, I said, why are you just double, triple checking everything that I'm doing, and versus allowing me to lead the project? And what I was advised was, is that this particular leader did actually, allow that project, a future, a present, an old project manager, the window to be able to do how they wanted to do. And in so many words, they let her down. And because they let her down, she was just wanted to make sure everything was right. And I said, I understand. I said, now I have a better understanding of why you feel the way that you feel, and why you're so aggressive of making sure everything is in place, because you don't want to be blindsided. And when I realized that, what I did was started providing, instead of weekly, every other day, recaps of, hey, these are the projects that I'm working on. These are exactly where they're at. And over time, I started seeing her kind of letting go, even, more and more. But it took time. So you have to understand where people are at, because you never know what they're dealing with personally, as well as at the job, the pressure. And this is a caveat to what we're talking about today, the pressures that they're going through. So I first try to have that empathy, a tactical empathy of just listening, not listening to respond, but actually listening. There, I feel there's a difference between listening and hearing. Like right now, I hear outside my window the mailman going to different places. But if I wanted to listen, meaning that now listening to Phil, because he set the bar, as far as, hey, this is what actually can go on through technical empathy. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Ed. And Daryl, I'm going to ask for you to just do a check to make sure that that problem has gone away. So, Ed, do you want to say something, right? Just to check to make sure
Hello?
this. So
Yes.
Daryl, is it still echoing when Ed speaks?
Yes, sir.
Still echoing. Okay. So I will go on mute whenever Ed speaks and whenever you speak. But continuing with that discussion, let me call you to the table, Daryl. You asked the question. You see, Daryl is very good at analyzing and asking questions because he knows how to get the best out of the people he's on the call with. So I'm going to ask Daryl to I'm going to ask Daryl to answer his own question. Daryl, you want to share with us?
Absolutely, Phil. So first off, I'm no expert. I'm just the student, and I still consider myself the student in project management. However, with real life situations, those are the situations that made me go down that rabbit hole on how to analyze and be able to talk in front of people. One of my mentors in the past always stressed to me that I have to be able to learn to talk to executives. And that was my blind spot as a PM, even in both government space and commercial space. And even being on here is helping me practice, speak to people just like yourselves, and the audience as a whole. So using those techniques as far as tactical empathy and reading Ed's book, it's really hitting home on how I'm able to apply Ed's knowledge and also tactical empathy and also yours, Phil, in regards to my day-to-day work and how to deal with life in general, both personal and professional.
Hey, Phil, I want to
Thank
say
you.
something. We're all students here, Daryl, and that's one thing I love about you. He's always so humble. And, it kind of reminds me of the Karate Kid. We always talk about how Mr. Miyagi actually trained the Karate Kid, but we forget a valuable point, the foundation. What was the foundation of led that Daniel's son to go training? Well, he was sick and tired of being sick and tired, meaning that he was being bullied. He wasn't getting the respect that he felt that he got. His mom just moved from a state where he was very comfortable at to a place where he was uncomfortable at. See, being uncomfortable is where the riches are. And I'm not talking about a monetary value. I'm talking about being able to work on yourself. So you're going to run into people that are not going to appreciate what you bring to the table. They're not going to appreciate how you're willing to go above and beyond. And I'm going to say this publicly, then it's time to move on. What's the point of working on yourself and develop yourself 1% better each day and then not being able to take those skill sets and applying it to somebody that, watch this, that wants to celebrate you and not tolerate you? Ooh, I like that. Reason why I like it is because of the fact that if you ever been to a celebration and you've been the focal point of that celebration, it feels so good. It feels like, why did I wait so long to get here? But when you're tolerated, it's like you're literally just walking into work, or if you work remote, it's just like, oh my God, just another day. Here we go again. All right, it's Monday. I love what Les Brown talked about. He said, on Sundays, and I've had this, family, if I'm just going to be honest with you, is that I'm thinking, oh man, how many meetings do I have on Monday? Because man, and you start feeling that little sharp pain in your chest and you're wondering, you like, it shouldn't feel like this. And when you get to that point, it's time to reassess, as Phil broke down some really amazing points. But one of the things that resonated with me, that arrested my attention, was you need to reassess what you're doing. What's the point of getting a PMP, CAPM, ACP, all of these amazing certifications, spending time in honing your craft, if you're unwilling to take the leap? And as Steve Harvey talked about, building your parachute on the way down. So all I say to you is, I'm not saying walk away. I'm saying walk towards your destiny, walk towards what's inside of you. And you know what's inside. You know this is not right. And if you know it's not right, what are you going to do to take advantage of what's inside of you? I'm done, Phil.
Great stuff, Ed. Thank you very much for that. And thank you, Daryl. Let's jump into the rest of the content that we have for our viewers. So we've talked about this comprehending stress, and we've heard quite a lot to already begin to map out how we would handle it, right? I want to say thank you to our friend Colleen for joining. Colleen says that's real, as far as some of the comments that you and Daryl and I have shared. And she says, I'm feeling calm just listening to this. So, thank you very much, Colleen, and everyone else who has joined and come through. Thank you very much. So let's go back into the rest of the content before we round up. So you understand it is important to comprehend stress. Number two, analyzing triggers. You need to know your triggers. It's part of what you should analyze. Knowledge is power, and by identifying what ignites our stress, we can effectively manage it. How many of you have been in a situation that you know is not going to end well if you remain in it? You just know, I need to get out of this room. I need to get out of this building. I need to leave this meeting. Look, don't be a sitting duck on your own grenade. Tell yourself, I need to do something no matter how obnoxious I look when I'm taking action, because if I don't, I'm going to look worse. So when you're getting to that point, politely excuse yourself. Seriously, physically remove yourself from that situation. So you got to identify your personal hot buttons. You got to recognize the common triggers. How many of you have had a coworker who their very proximity gets in your personal space and it's a trigger and you're still there? Seriously? As a project manager, you've got to be candid and honest and pragmatic to take yourself out of that scenario, because it does not end well. Or you end up coming across as a loose grenade. And you're not. The only thing is, it's one of your hot buttons. Let's not judge anyone. We all have hot buttons. Let's be honest. I have hot buttons. Ed has hot buttons. Daryl does. We all do. And we need to understand these triggers. We got to have a hot button map, as it were, in our heads to know, okay, my hot button comes up when someone is trying to tell me XYZ things under ABC situation. You got to be really analytical about it. Some of you could actually use this in your everyday life, because some of you might have your buttons made extremely depressed in an everyday scenario, and you're wondering if, no, nothing is wrong with you. You just need to know that this is a hot button and take yourself out of it. One of my hot buttons is people keeping me in line. Has someone ever kept you in line in just a regular everyday, and it's like the person doesn't know what they want? Okay, sir, do you want a 1, 2, or 3? And you're behind that person, and you spend 10 minutes in line to order what would have taken maybe 30 seconds or 1 minute at worst. It's one of my hot buttons. I don't know about you, but I hate having to be in line. Don't judge me now. Don't judge me. That's me, right? I know some of you are like, oh no, I knew Phil had a little skeleton in his cupboard. He's impatient. Don't judge me. I'm not impatient, but when I'm made to wait, I hate that. I don't like being kept waiting. Why? Time is money. It's one of my hot buttons. Don't judge me. What are your hot buttons? That's the question. Okay, it's just a joke. I know you're not judging me. Let's move on. Number 3, equipping oneself with coping techniques is akin to having an armor against stress. When you know your hot buttons, equip yourself with a coping mechanism. You know my coping mechanism for being in line when the person, it's a simple checkout. Maybe you're grabbing a salad or you're grabbing some food, and this person, oh, I like this, but I don't like, you know what I do? I whip out my phone. I whip out my phone, and it's my coping mechanism, because I don't even want to emote on my face. So I'm going to start working on my device. What is your coping mechanism for your hot buttons, right? Deep breathing and relaxation techniques is great when you're under stress. It's very important to realize that stress is not always caused by one single person. Stress could be caused by a situation at work that has been developed, so it becomes fast-paced and breakneck. There are other situations that develop at work when the leader did not get the memo to not spread disease to their people. What am I talking about? When the leader does not understand that how they emote and how they come across and their body language could be a cancer that just affects the entire business unit, and then everyone's walking on eggshells. That is someone who didn't understand the memo of leadership and EI, because EI is understanding how to bridle your emotions and how to influence the emotions of others. You see? So in a lot of situations, it may not be the one person. It may be it's just grown like a cancer, and then everyone is passive aggressive. You ever been in the passive aggressive workplace? You ever been there? You know how I deal with that? Passive aggression. 1, candor. I feel you are annoyed or upset about something I did. Let me apologize. Is there anything we need to discuss? I'm very open, almost sometimes to a fault, when it comes to just getting it all on the table and let's have a discussion, right? I don't let it fester. So one of the ways I cope with these things, I just be open and honest and transparent, and let's talk about it. So deep breathing could work for someone, but for me, no. I don't want to date myself, but I'm too old to keep hiding from passive aggressiveness. Put it on the table. Let's talk about it. What are you mad about? Let's have an open, honest discussion. And I'm not coming from a place of maliciousness. I'm just coming from a place of candor. And of course, I'm not going to say it with as much vigor, but I would probably say it with a smile. Hey, Ed, I feel that there's some stuff that we need to talk about. Can we have grab a quick lunch? Can we have a quick discussion? Or can we just duck into a conference room? Ed, there's something I really want to talk to you about. The reason why you need to do this is if you don't do it, it's going to keep messing with you. And then the workplace that's already feeling toxic isn't going to get any better. It's just going to get worse. So as a business professional, you really need to master the art of coping techniques with open discussion. Have you ever had a discussion with someone that it just let all the tension out? It just brings down the temperature. If you've not been there, then you probably don't get what I'm talking about. But you got to be open. So there's a number of factors I've discussed. One, stress doesn't come from one person all the time. It could just be the culture. You ever been in an organization where the culture is a hamster in the wheel? Keep running, keep running. What's behind you? Nothing? Just keep running. You ever been in that kind of organization? No, just refuse to allow that environment rule you. Ask yourself, why am I stressed? Is there a milestone that's coming? And even if there's a milestone that's coming, you shouldn't be stressed continually about it. It's good to first of all say, oh, why am I stressed about this milestone? Are we going to miss it? If it looks like we're going to miss it, as a project manager, what do I need to do with my team to better manage this? Crashing options, fast tracking options, through additional hiring, or maybe it's not even additional hiring. Maybe it's asking someone from the organization to jump in to help. A lot of people, they want to show they're Superman. They don't want to ask for help. So they're stressed continually because they don't want to delegate. So they're stressed. They don't want to coach, mentor, and train others. So they end up taking on all the work. I could go on and on. There's so many scenarios and case studies for this, but let me move on. Number 3, conflict resolution skills, which I implicitly touched on by talking about transparency. Honestly, conflict is good when it is managed, when all the chips are put on the table. If you're not putting the chips on the table to discuss, then conflict is just going to fester and get worse. All right, number 4, creating personal stress management plans. This is something that you need to do for yourself, but you need to have a plan for how to deal with stress. Now, I'm giving you very pragmatic examples because I don't want this to just be theory. One of my coping mechanisms to manage stress is to go to my happy place. Okay? Again, it may seem a little bit outlandish or strange, but you take your own world and build your own stress coping mechanism. One of my ways of coping with stress, and again, it's not necessarily conflict, it could be work overload, is to treat myself to be in my happy place. What is my happy place? It could be walking by a fountain. I love fountains, I love waterfalls. It could be just going for a swim. You ever treated yourself to a well-deserved swim? Come on now. Go for a swim. But my happiest place of all is when I'm making music, because I'm also a musician. I go to my favorite place on earth after other places I won't go into now, but my favorite place is Guitar Center. I love Guitar Center. This is unsolicited advertising, but I've probably spent upwards of 10 grand at Guitar Center buying different things that amuse me because I'm a musician, right? I've spent upwards of 3.9 on one piece of equipment because it makes me happy. It makes me happy. Don't judge me. Someone say, Phil, that's dumb. Why would you spend 4 grand on a keyboard? But it makes me happy. Whatever makes you happy. I'm not saying go broke. Don't go buy the Ferrari tomorrow. Don't say Phil told me to do it. No, that's not what I'm saying. But whatever makes you happy could also be a coping mechanism. I'm giving you some pragmatic examples because I don't want this to just be theory. So what do? I always go to my happy place. Case in point, I do a lot of training. I'm on the road a lot. Okay, I travel the world training. One of the things I do to treat myself after a day of grind, I go to my happy place in that city. I go to Guitar Center in that city, and it relieves stress and tension. I hope that gave you some ideas of how you can go to your happy place and make things better for yourself. So create your personal stress management plan, whatever it looks like. Okay? Before we go to the fourth point, I want to ask my buddies, because I've just been talking and talking, I'm going to go on mute, and I'm going to ask Ed and Daryl to comment on analyzing triggers and hot buttons. Let me ask Daryl first. Daryl, do you want to talk about analyzing triggers and then coping techniques? You want to talk about these two for a moment?
Absolutely, Phil. How I started analyzing behaviors, as what I call it, is watching people's video screens and looking at their eyes, using techniques of how they feel. And to start off the conversation, I'm always asking, how are you? To break the ice and to share that insightful moment and be personal before going into the actual meeting. With coping techniques, I use a fidget spinner, for example. I have a toy that I hold every time, and I use that to relieve my stress.
Good deal, Daryl. Thank you for that. So you've kind of touched on analyzing the triggers and the coping techniques. Let me ask Ed. Ed, do you want to speak to, because I know you've been in a number of situations, Ed.
Mhm.
I am really looking forward to learning from you on how you analyze and how you cope.
Yeah, Phil, and like you said, to make it more pragmatic, one of the things that I found that really helps me, and sometimes, I'm consistent with it, and other times, I'll fall off. And I notice when I'm staying consistent, it really works. So being able to get on the treadmill and do a simple walk uphill, incline at the highest that the treadmill goes, and put on some motivational music and speaker and just listen. So going back to what Colleen said, I definitely agree with that point of being able to walk it off. That has helped me so much. Another piece is leveraging like a Calm or Balance app, which is a meditation app, and being able to do that also prepares me for the battles that are going to go ahead, and it really helps relieve some stress. And I want to add on some more. Sometimes we put stress on ourselves because we want to be the best version of ourselves, and that additional stress can also lead us to feeling even more stressed out. So we have to be cognizant of that. And maybe I'm just speaking to myself, but I'm being transparent with you because I put more pressure on myself than I allow someone else to do. And when I see myself doing that, I step back and I say, why am I doing this? And I literally started writing. I started doing this thing where and I learned it from a book, and I forgot the name of the book but it's based on being able to document your day from a high level, like one or two lines. And I started doing that and just going back month over month to see where I was at. Like, why was I so upset or frustrated? Oh, that's why, because this person said this and it triggered something. But my response was, I document how my response was. So those are some pragmatic tips. Back over to you, Phil.
Thank you, Ed. Looking for my unmute. I need to find out about the echo, but thank you very much for sharing that. I really got a lot from what you said. The treadmill is great in organizations where there's a gym or something like that. It could actually be a good checkpoint, sometime within the day. And those who are at home, Ed and I, we are both treadmill aficionados. I would definitely advise maybe looking into that. Chris, who was on here a little moment ago, he's a Peloton aficionado. So health is wealth. It's very important. One thing I've noticed is if your mental state is at peak, you can deal better with conflict. If you haven't had a workout, you haven't had some exercise, it could really impede your performance, not just when it comes to conflict, but just in general. So, this is not to preach fitness to anyone, but I highly, highly advise you to get on a bad wagon of fitness and look for a solution that works. Ed talks about an app. I have an app right here on my phone. If those of you who follow me on social media, you've seen me interview one of my buddies. Both of us have been on the V-Shred program. He lost over 212 pounds. This guy lost 212 pounds with an app, the V-Shred app. A lot of people see Vince and think, oh, this is, that's why we need to be careful about things we call scams. Some people say, oh, that's a scam. I lost upwards of 25 pounds. My buddy lost over 212 pounds. If you look in my LinkedIn pages of past, I actually feature an interview where I've interviewed this buddy of mine. So health is wealth. That's all I'm saying. It's very important. With that said, let's jump into the topic of wellness, incidentally, right? Let's go there. Let's talk about it. It's the elephant in the room. A lot of people don't like hearing about it because they feel judged, and no one is judging anyone. We're only here to motivate and inspire, but it's so important, maintaining a culture of workplace wellness. When we talk about wellness, there are two components. You could think about the physical, and then you can think about the mental. A lot of people get it twisted. Both are connected, very, very connected. If you're not in a physical place of wellness, your mind is definitely not going to be as well as it could be. And if your mind isn't as well as it could be, just forget the inspiration and the motivation to even get on that treadmill to do the uphill climb that Ed is talking about. But I want to wager that if you can get the body aligned, you're going to be thinking better. And if you can get the mind aligned, you're going to want to work out. And when I say work out, I'm not saying do the crazy power lifts and, I'm not saying go do a David Goggins challenge. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying just in your own realm, find what works for you. It could be a walk down the street and back, right? Like my mom, her birthday is today. Happy birthday to my mom. But I wouldn't expect her to do a 1 mile, even a half-mile walk, let alone a 40 mile. So, but in her realm of comfort, the little things that she's able to do, that's a win for her at 89. You get what I'm saying? So a healthy workplace doesn't just boost productivity, it fosters growth, mental growth as a team, creativity as a team, collaboration, and all this good stuff. So as a leader, which you are, I want you to take this consciousness back to the workplace. Number one, build a culture of well-being. Please ask your team this question. Please, can I just implore you? Because there are a lot of people that have this misnomer, bro, that's weak. I've actually been to companies where the individuals say, Phil, we just have to work. Nobody cares whether you're well or not, just work. And I'm like, my goodness, that is horrible. Who do you work for? Which planet is your company from that all they're thinking about is the output? They're not even interested in your well-being. Well, probably that's a bad place to be right from the get-go. Most companies have got a lot of companies have gotten the memo today where wellness is very important. So I want you as a leader to promote this culture of well-being. I want you to ask the question, how are you today? Ask the question. I want you to look into having a mood chart for your group meetings as you see fit. If you are a VP, CIO, CTO, COO, whatever role you're in, you need to be asking these questions. Chief people officers are great, but we shouldn't leave all the work for them. What about you at your level? Ask the question, how are you doing today? Here's a mood chart. Smiley face, meh face, sad face, abominable feeling face. Ask the question. You're a leader. These are the things that matter. It's not the bag, first and foremost. It's not the revenues. It's the people. Let me remind you, those of us who have heard about it. In the world of project management, there's something we call agile, right? We call it agility. The Agile Manifesto just states you should value individuals and interactions. Let's just leave the interactions, but let's talk about the individuals first. Do you value the individual? Have you created an environment where everyone on the team values everyone else? We at PLI value each other. Ed values Daryl. Daryl values Ed. I value Ed. I value Chris. I value Daryl. I value all of our members. We value each other. We feed off each other. So if one person is not happy, then the rest of us need to be concerned and show support. Do you know the amount of gravity that takes or that gives when you know someone is concerned about you in the workplace? Because in most workplaces, they don't care. To keep it polite, I was going to use some more colorful language, but they really couldn't give a care, to keep it polite. Ed knows what I wanted to say. But I'll keep it polite. But we don't want to be that way. We don't want to keep the workplace like that. We need to be the change agent. All right. I think I'm going off on a tangent, so I'm going to very quickly go back to my main points and finish off. Number 2 is promote open communication. One of the things that we say in the world of Agile, to go Agile again, it just says that you should give the team the environment and support they need and trust them to get the job done. And it says face-to-face communication. That is the best way. I say it's the dopest way. Why wouldn't you communicate face-to-face? You know that you got a high-stakes conflict, and you want to do this in email? Come on now. That's not promoting a culture of workplace wellness. Leave the phone. Leave your pretty little email, which is Pandora's box. Have a face-to-face where possible. Where possible is what I'm saying. If it's not possible, please turn the camera on. Turn the camera on and let the other person see your empathy. I didn't say hear your empathy. I said see it through your body language. Okay, open communication. Number 3, implement stress reduction initiatives. There are times when you just need to tell your team time out. There's one of our members at PLI, and she tells us of her boss who just says, all right, everyone, you've been overdoing it. Time out. And I'm like, wow, that's a good initiative. When the team's been grinding and you know that, okay, stress reduction initiatives need to be put in place. Let's all go for a walk. As a team, yeah, all 5 of us, let's go for a walk. That's a great way of stress reduction as a team. And last but not least, number 4, develop a workplace wellness action plan. I challenge you to do that for your team. If you're working with a team of individuals and you have not asked, how are you? You're doing it wrong. I don't care whether you're the PM or a developer. We all have a responsibility of servant leadership. So we should ask the question. There are a lot of people who wouldn't say anything. I was on LinkedIn going through the feed and I just saw a death. And I couldn't understand it. This is someone who always looks happy-go-lucky. Are you kidding me? This individual was really suffering inside to the point that he had to do that. You just never know what people are going through, my friend. You got to show empathy. You got to ask. You got to maintain a culture of workplace wellness. I'm going to go on mute and I'm going to ask Daryl to comment. Daryl, you want to share any insights?
Absolutely, Phil. Wellness is one of the key aspects of being a successful project manager and even in your personal life. I blame COVID for that because it opened up the opportunity to understand ourselves. Like, for example, if you don't fix yourself as being healthy or the wellness part, you won't be able to handle situations like how to handle a narcissist stakeholder as a project manager or how to handle a stakeholder who has conditions such like PTSD or depression or topics just like that we don't talk about as project managers. We talk about it outside of that circle of teams, you know, but it's one of those topics where we have to put that to the table and keep that in the forefront of being a PM in that environment. So touching and going over wellness is very important to a project manager and also in your personal life. And my that's from my experience as a young PM and a student in this industry as well, Phil.
It's funny you say that, Daryl, because I was thinking about what you said of that teams don't address that, they talk outside of you. And Alex Hormozy talked about something, and I'm paraphrasing, where he said you would go and, let's say, for instance, you're having if issues with your significant other, or just and let's say I'm having issues with you, Daryl, and instead of talking to you, I'm talking to Phil and everybody else around you, and the problem is not being addressed. And going back to that whole original thing, what if we address those and we talk through, hey, what's going on? This is normally not like you. Could you help me understand what is happening? And so I think we have to start doing more of that, of what you said, Daryl. So I really like that point, instead of going outside of the meeting and start bringing it inside, because if we start bringing it inside, we can get to the root of everything, instead of what I always say, instead of doing this surface level problem solving. Back to you, Phil.
Thank you, Ed. I was just making sure I didn't talk over anyone because of my microphone. But those are really awesome points. I really appreciate you sharing that. So, to summarize, over the past number of minutes, we've been talking about how to be calm in the workplace. We've been talking about the first letter, coping, right? Coping techniques. So, coping techniques such as walking it off, deep breathing, managing your time more effectively so you don't get stressed. We've talked about analyzing triggers before you get there, and we've talked about comprehending stress. So here's a very quick run through of the major points of today. First of all, you got to understand yourself. Secondly, you got to analyze the triggers. Thirdly, you got to learn coping techniques. And fourthly, make it a lifestyle. And don't just think about your well being, just maintain a culture of workplace wellness all around. Mindfulness of that culture all around. Any closing remarks before we finish? Because the next thing I want to do is just show people how they can contact each one of us. So before we get there, can you give me a very quick wrap up, Daryl, and then we'll go to Ed, and then we'll conclude?
Definitely, Phil. Mic check, can you hear me? All right, echo's gone. Uh, First off, thank you again for having me. And Ed, thank you again for sharing this experience with you in regards to launching your book. I'm actually reading your book physically. It just came in the mail this past Monday. And like I said, in the beginning of our session, it's really hitting home to me as a PM and as a project controller because of the communication aspect and the leadership aspect of where I'm at in my career. And also, these topics are chapter one of the Pinball Guide, 7th edition, and even 6th edition as well. So I really do thank you for sharing your experience as a PM, publishing your book, and thank you again, and hope to see you again in the near future. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Daryl. Over to you, Ed.
First of all, I want to thank you, Daryl, for your kind words. I truly appreciate it, because you didn't have to. So thank you for that. I also want to thank Phil, because a lot of this wouldn't be possible because of that. And because of that aspect, I put him in the book, as far as just to really acknowledge him for really pushing me. There was times I didn't want to move forward on the book because of being vulnerable, because of, hey, what are people going to say? Are they going to attack my work? But going through. That's why I'm a member of the PLI, because he makes us uncomfortable in a good way, meaning that he pushes us to be great. That's why we're here today doing this stream. We have some challenges, but has that agile mindset. Is like we adapt, we adjust, and we move forward and pivot. And so, again, I thank you for that. Last closing remark I want to say is, of course, please pick up the book, The Magnetic Project Manager. I do believe the link is in there at the Lulu store, ebook or paperback, but the paperback would really be good for you, a lightweight read. Just 9 chapters. Wanted to make sure it was concise and getting straight to the point, no fluff. And one thing I want to point out, my mentor said something to me that really will resonate with this conversation when you're dealing with work, being under pressure, or work in a working environment that you're trying to stay calm. Sometimes you need to understand what someone is not saying to you, meaning that you're looking at their body language and their mouth is saying one thing, but their body language is saying a different thing, or vice versa. So being able to understand what they're not saying to you is a tool that I've leveraged over my years of being a project manager. So again, thank you, Daryl. Thank you, Phil, because you guys didn't have to do this, and I'm appreciative. Over to you, Phil.
Thank you very much, Ed. I'm always looking for the unmute button because this has been a rather unique situation where my mic is the troublemaker. So apologize for that, but thank you for your understanding. To close out, let's just go into the chat and let's please paste our contact information. I'm going to ask both Ed and Daryl to do that. Just type it in. I'm going to do my best to type in the information, but if you could as well, that would be helpful. I will also go on to show the information on the screen for anyone who wants to reach out and contact us. So we belong to the Project Leadership Institute. It's a group of professional individuals, business people, and we meet every week to learn leadership, to explore and expand our horizon, to explore some entrepreneurial ventures as well. And if you wanted to join us, you could go to projectleadershipinstitute.com. We only open our doors once a year, so we're getting ready to open our doors for 2024. If that sounds like something you want to do, you want to be part of a group like this, where there are no holds barred, where we keep it real, where we keep it 100, then you need to go on down to the Project Leadership Institute site and sign up, and we'll be more than happy to give you some additional information as to how we operate. Beyond that, if you wanted to reach out to us individually, Daryl's channel is youtube.com/@influenceipm Ed's channel is youtube.com/@Edward Koch Jr. And you can always reach out to me via Praizion or here on LinkedIn through the Praizion page or the Project Leadership Institute page. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I appreciate you, and we'll see you again hopefully very soon. Bye for now.